week, and I just watched Kurt walk by with a shirt that said, watch Jesus washes sins away. I mean, how do we know the rain's, not a sign from above?
It may be.
I pray for rain for Australia.
I do too.
Yeah, right.
You're right.
I don't look at rain as a bad day. It gives me a day to relax and not be outside and do work.
Amen.
I understand that. But understand, part of the reason my feeling is, and here's what I'll tell you. I don't pray for rain, I don't pray against rain, because I learned from a farming community, every time I'm praying for a clear day to go on a picnic, some farmer is praying for rain for his crops.
That's right.
And they're both righteous prayers. I will tell you this. Yesterday I got up, we had our prayer vigil, and I looked at that rain. And when I got up, it wasn't really rain, it was just kind of yuck. And by the time the prayer vigil started, it was rain. And I have to tell you, how many of you know pastors aren't perfect? I'll be the first. In case you've never heard that, I'm going to tell you on the secret we're not. And the little negative person jumped on my shoulder and said, some people aren't going to come to the prayer vigil because it's raining. And I went, maybe. And he said, and some people aren't going to come because it's cold and rainy. And I have to tell you, I sat here and the first appointment, nobody was here. He went, Steve, told you so. But I have to tell you, if one person comes, it's a success. People all came. They came in the rain. They came through their time. I will say that Dawn and Hazel, they were at a funeral yesterday. And the weather messed that up a bit. But rain isn't always a bad thing. And the other thing I'll tell you is, as Christians, today's message fits that. Today's message is trouble on the journeys. Moses has been trying to get out of doing what God tells him to do. He has thrown up everything but the kitchen sink. I don't speak well. What if they don't listen to me? What if they don't believe me? And God has given him signs. He's given him a stick that turns to a snake. He's given him a hand that turns to leprosy. He's given him told them that if they don't agree, pour a bowl of water, it'll turn to blood. He's got a burning bush, and he's still trying. And finally, God says, I'm done with you. Do it. So he goes to Pharaoh. He gets his brother Aaron. Aaron is the spokesperson. Moses is the power behind the speech. And in chapter 5, actually we'll go to 4:29. Exodus chapter 4, verse 29. Moses and Aaron brought together all the elders from the Israelites, and Aaron told them everything the Lord had said to Moses. And he performed the signs before the people. See, he didn't even wait for them to disagree. He didn't even wait for them to bring up their issues. He said, the great God, the God that says I am the I am, says to do this, and this is a sign. Here's my stick, doom, and it turns into a snake. And he grabs his tail, and it turns into a stick. Now, we're not talking about what happened in Florida this week. Because of the cold, the iguanas fell out of the trees. It wasn't that it turned stiff like an iguana that falls out of a tree. It was a stick. And it turned into a living substance. How many of you know that dead things don't come back to life normally? And how many of you know that tree branches don't become animals? That's what he showed the Israelites. And he put his hand in his shirt or in his coat, and it came out covered in leprosy, which was a dread disease. It was a disease that in its day was worse than AIDS, because there was no cure. And when you had it, you had to be away from people because it was highly contagious. Just being in a room with them could get it. Gee, sound a little like coronavirus? And he put it back in, and it came back normal. So after all this, The Israelite people realized that the God who is the I Am, the God who wants to heal their needs, the God who heard them in their slavery. By the way, how many of you know slavery takes many forms?
Yeah.
See, we live in a free country, but there's many people who are enslaved. Some people are enslaved in their own sin. Some people are enslaved in the sin of others. Some people are enslaved by their own addiction. Some people are enslaved. There is still human slavery in this country. And it's abominable. It is horrid and abhorrent. I saw newspaper or news TV PSA. How to recognize human trafficking in your community. I never thought I'd have to worry about that. But it's here. And our community, we like to think that we're nice, but our community is no better and no worse than any other community in the country. Is that fair? Our drug issues are no better and no worse than anybody else in the country. My son at one point in his life worked at a casino, and they had a saying, nobody dies at a casino. They had a guy who jumped off a 5-story building. He didn't die at the casino. He died at the hospital. That's just because they wouldn't let anybody pronounce him.
Oh, I thought he would have died from the ground.
Well, yeah. So Moses goes to Pharaoh. He finally gets his act together. He finally moves through praying. He finally moves through listening. And now he's going to act. Chapter 5, verse 1. After Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh, and they said, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, let my people go. And everybody stops there. That's not where it ends. That's just a comma. Where it ends is, so that they may hold a festival for me in the desert. God says, let me have my say. And I'm not trying to take over your country. Go out into the desert place. Let my people go out there and see who I am. Remember, where was Moses when he saw the burning bush? In a desert place. When I was a kid, we had a place that we called the desert. My wife's laughing because the desert, Bob, you're allowed to laugh too, because when I describe this, you're just going to chuckle, okay? No, it wasn't the beach.
Nope.
It was a plot of land, a half a mile wide and a mile long, right next to, in Cape May they have a canal that cuts off Cape May Island. What happened was, back in the 30s and 40s, when they dug the canal, they threw all the sludge into this area. It's unbuildable, covered with trees and rabbits. I used to like it because there were 4 hickory trees there, and I like hickory nuts. And there were 3 grapevines. We kids would go out during the summer season, we'd eat grapes and hickory nuts. Parents wouldn't know why we weren't hungry. But it was one of those places nobody went. Partly because you could walk and you could take 6 steps and you'd be fine. You take the 7th step or the 19th step or the whatever number step, because you never knew, and you'd be this deep in muck. And if you tried to fight out of it, it left your shoe in there. You had to explain why your sneaker came home with 1 foot. You'll wonder why I don't wear socks. You take 2 steps and you're up to your waist. We used to call it quicksand because it was soft and under it. And if you tried to move, the more you moved, the deeper you went. More than once did a couple friends and I call for each other, go cut a grapevine, quick! God says, I want you to go out in the desert. Moses finally gets the gumption up to listen to God and go to Pharaoh like he's been told to do. And he says to Pharaoh, the God of the Israelites want you to let their people go out into the desert for a festival. Pharaoh said, who's this Lord that I should obey him? Who is he that I should let Israel go? I do not know this Lord, and I'm not letting them go. Remember, they're his workforce. Think about it in practical terms. Somebody comes up to your boss of your company of 100 or 200 and says, give them 3 days off. I just heard somebody giggle. Patty, somebody walked up to your boss and said, give all your whole office 3 days off. You think the boss would be like, yeah, no problem. You think that?
Oh, no.
Oh, no. I heard it right now. Then they said, the God of the Hebrews has met us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. Or he may strike us with plagues and with the sword. You gotta let us go or it's going to be bad. But the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, said, Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to work. Then Pharaoh said, look, the people of the land, they're now numerous. See, one of the reasons they enslaved them was because there were so many of them, they were afraid that they would overcome. Why? Because God had taken about 120 people and turned it into 1.5 million. And it scared the locals. Now I want you to think about this for a minute. If God were to bless this church in a divine way beyond what he normally does, if next week, instead of being the 25, 30 that we are, there were 130. And the week after that, there were 340. And the week after that, there were 680. And we were doing 5 services a day out of the main sanctuary. Okay? Number one, it'd kill me. But let's assume God gives me the strength to do that, because when God asks you to do something, he prepares you to do it. All of a sudden, some people in the community would get a little concerned about us. How many of you know that would happen? All of a sudden, Hopewell Township Police would be going, hey, you know, at the end of service, there's a traffic jam. We can't have that. It's going to cost the township money to put a police officer there to direct traffic. That's a bad corner anyway. And some of the neighbors would be going, you know, there's a lot of noise coming out of your church at 11:15.
Woo!
Yeah.
Or as we said earlier, for those of you that are on YouTube, we were talking about the idea that some churches like ours could use one of those inflatable things just to let people know we're here. But here's what I want us to understand. One of the things that Moses and Aaron didn't say was that when Moses was talking to the bush and the bush was talking to Moses, the bush said, Moses, there's going to be issues. You remember that from a couple weeks ago? Moses said, the bush said, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart so that God's glory can show through. And the people, Pharaoh in particular, said, you know what? These Israelites must have too much time on their hands. They're not working hard enough for me. So we're going to they make bricks to build the pyramids. They're making bricks to build the houses. They're making bricks to build the Sphinx. They're making bricks to build the glory of Egypt up. And does anybody know how they make bricks back then?
Water,
Mud and straw.
yeah,
Water,
straw,
mud,
straw.
water, dirt, and straw, clay and straw. And they would use the straw, short pieces, chopped up, as a binder,
Yes.
holding it together. Similar to why you put an egg in a meatloaf to help hold it together.
Today we call it cob.
Cob.
Yeah.
What?
Cob.
COB. So what happens is, they're building these bricks, and what's happening is the Egyptians are bringing in the straw, the Israelites are chopping up fine, putting it in the mud, and they say, well, if you have that much time, we're not getting straw anymore, but you can't make less bricks. Keep the number up, but you're going to have to work hard. You were doing a 12-hour day, you're lazy, so we'll make it a 15-hour day. I live down in Cape May. There's a shirt down there because Cape May is a seashore town and has a pirate theme. And it says, the beatings will continue till the morale improves. Okay? That's what he said. Well, when you're told that the beatings will continue till you get a better attitude, one, it's counterproductive. But what he was really doing and what he was really saying was, I'm going to make it hard on the people that you're trying to help. How many of you know when somebody steps up and tries to help, the first thing you do is try and get the people that they're helping to get angry at them? Have you ever seen that? You try to help somebody and the first thing they do is snap at you? There's going to be trouble. And Moses, what they did was, the people actually came to Moses and said, yeah, thanks a lot, pal. Thanks. We were overworked, now we're double overworked, and it's your fault. If you want to help us anymore, leave us alone. How many of you would take that to heart? I had a friend of mine, good guy, tried to help people at every turn, and sometimes his help made it worse. And people would say, you want to help me? Don't help me. You ever know somebody that did that? They'd work on the job with you, and they were much better if they were working with somebody else. It made it easier if they went over there. I should use this hand sometimes, shouldn't I? So the people go to Pharaoh and they say, hey, Pharaoh, come on, stop, man. You're killing us. Pharaoh told his men, be hard on them, make them get their own cob, their own straw, but they better not drop their brick quota. Production stays the same. It's not my problem if they're that lazy. Isn't it funny whenever somebody wants an even break, you're lazy? And they actually got done with Pharaoh, got nowhere with him, and the first people they meet is, guess who? Moses and Aaron. The Israelite foremen realized they were in trouble. This is verse 19 of chapter 5. You are not to reduce the number of bricks required of you each day. When they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. And they said, may the Lord look upon you and judge you. Moses, Aaron, can the Lord look at you and judge you? By the way, that's not a compliment. That's their way of saying, you made it harder. We're not happy. You have made us a stench to Pharaoh and his officials and have put a sword in their hand to kill us. Moses and Aaron are just trying to take them out of slavery, and they're being told that they're the bad guys. When somebody tries to take somebody out of slavery, sometimes you'll be known as the bad guy, even by the slave. Verse 22, Moses returned to the Lord and said, Lord, why have you brought trouble upon the people? See, he could have said, Lord, how come they're mad at me? But he was looking bigger. Lord, how come you're mad at the people? How come you brought the people to a hard time? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he's brought trouble upon the people, and you haven't even rescued the people. Here's why. Does that make sense? See, you try and do a good thing for somebody and somebody else, outside influences make it harder. The first thing you think is, why did I do that? Why? I thought I was helping them. And the truth is, in the church, we do the same thing. How many of you know that most hospitals were started because of religious influence? How many of you know that in our country, most higher education was started by churches? Religious influences. And slowly, we gave them up. We gave them up because that was divisive. We were teaching something different. And the colleges and educations and hospitals haven't been getting better. They've been getting worse. One of our sister denominations is in the middle of a church split over popular culture versus the Word of God. And it's getting harder. One state statute just made it tougher for churches to teach the Word of God. We're going to go to a time, and it was about 5 years ago, that Austin, Texas, and I'm going to name names, told their pastors that all church-related materials have to be given to the government to approve. This is not a foreign country, folks. This is Austin, Texas, USA. And if you don't do it, you'll be fined or imprisoned.
Including sermons.
Including sermons. By the way, when they do that, you're going to have to get a new pastor because this one's going to be in jail. Okay, I'm just going to lay it out here. To make sure that you don't say anything inflammatory. We like being in our slave sin state. And we don't want you to say anything that's going to allow us to be set free. And it's easy to get negative, and it's easy to get sad. But the truth of the matter is, Moses was told that this all stuff was going to happen. Moses was told that Pharaoh was going to give him a hard time. Guess why? Do any of you ever wonder why you go through hard times as a Christian? How many of you, since you've asked Jesus into your heart, how many of you have gone through hard times? How many of you need to come to the altar for lying? Everybody didn't raise their hand. Okay? Because if we're honest with ourselves, Jesus said it. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart. Greater is he who's in you than he who's in the world.
Amen.
In this world, you're going to have problems. In this world, you're going to be misunderstood. In this world, there's going to be big issues. In this world, the church is going to struggle. But take heart. I already beat the game. Kurt and I had opportunity this week. We were talking about video games and how some people are obsessed by it. And my son went through his video game phase. I don't know why I'm moving the bottom fingers. They don't play in the game. Probably that's why I don't play video games. But his great joy was when he beat the game. He would brag for a couple days. Dad, it only took me 7.5 hours to beat this game. You have 7.5 hours to play that game? Yeah, but it only took me 150 tries. But that's how we should look at it. Yeah, it might be difficult. We might do 150 tries. But the truth is, we've already beat the game.
Amen.
Some of us beat that game yesterday right here at this altar, and those seats, and around this building. Because you know what the cool part was? I sat here the entire time. I came in before everybody for the prayer retreat, and I left after everybody was done, or close to it. And the cool part was, everybody did it different. No two people prayed alike. Some people looked at the sign and went, nah. Some people looked at the paper and went, yeah. Some people said, I have my own agenda. And it's all good. Because God has it all in plan. Mm-hmm. God's plan included the troubles. Pastor, you really believe that? Yes. I don't believe in a prosperity gospel. I don't believe that God gives you tit for tat or better or 10 times as much. I believe that God gives you what you need. Mm-hmm. I also believe that God opens up people's lives, their hearts, their minds, their bodies. And I also know that some people who are watching on YouTube today have never watched this before. And I know that God wants to meet their needs, your needs, and our needs. How's that? Mm-hmm. I'm also pretty sure that God knows what the income of every human being on the planet is. Mm-hmm. And if God thought we needed it, He would drop $1 million in our lap. Mm-hmm. And we would take care of some things. Mm-hmm. And we would use it wisely. And we would use it to minister. Mm-hmm. I also know that sometimes God doesn't do it because we're not ready for that yet. I'm going to jump fast forward because we're almost out of time. Pharaoh wouldn't budge. Pharaoh got hard-hearted. And from that came the 10 plagues. How many of you remember the 10 plagues? There was the water turned to blood. There were frogs. There were flies. There were lice. there were boils, there were total pitch blackness, and all of those things only happened in Egypt. They didn't happen in Israel. Can you imagine at noon being so dark for 3 days that you couldn't see your hand in front of your face? And the minute you walk out of your country, and for those on YouTube, I'm going to step out of frame for a minute. The minute you walked out of country and stepped over into the Israelite land, it was broad daylight. And then you had to turn around and go back home. And it was pitch black. And you're going, that's not right. How does that even work? I have never seen a day where it has been so dark I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And after each time Moses goes, Pharaoh, are you listening yet? Pharaoh, are you ready yet? And finally it came to the 10th plague. The angel of death came over the whole land, and the firstborn of everything was killed. And this one, they told the Israelites, if you don't follow the directions, you're in trouble too. If you don't put the blood on the doorpost, which when you put it on the doorpost a certain way, it actually makes the equivalent of a cross. Isn't it funny how the Old Testament and New Testament run together? The firstborn of everything. Firstborn males of all. Not just humans, but the critters too. Died. And guess what happened? There was weeping and crying all through Egypt. Now I just jumped like 6 chapters, okay? I want you to know that. And that took months. But it occurred. Because after each plague, God let Moses go to Pharaoh and say, Pharaoh. And Pharaoh thought about it, and Pharaoh got his heart hardened again. Because the truth is, our Christian walk doesn't go bing, 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 bing. It's a series of days, and each day there may not be much difference, but over the course of the time, there's huge difference. And it got harder before it got easier. And the people balked before they got obedient. Folks, we're working on the plan. The plan for this congregation at Pennington Grace Church of the Nazarene, GCCN, is we're going to pray. We're going to pray for our neighbors. We're going to pray for our community. We're going to pray for our church. We're going to pray for ourselves. By the way, at the prayer vigil yesterday, there were prayers for the vision of this church. There were prayers for the one more, because we still want one more to come in every week. There were prayers for the finances of the church, because the truth of the matter is, if we don't have the finances, we can't do what we do ministry-wise. There was prayers for the ministry, but there was also prayer that we would grow. Because the truth is, if we're not growing spiritually, if we've reached all that we think God has for us, we're going to become spiritual midgets. And that's not talking about people's state, it's talking about their complacency. We should be hungry for God, not just going through the motions. And all this happened. And finally, after the angel came across and the firstborn of every household died, Jew and Egyptian alike, the Egyptians went to Pharaoh and they said, Pharaoh, we've had enough with this God. Let him go. Pharaoh says, okay, you can leave. And the people actually took their wealth. And as the women and the men of the house of Israel being set free for the promised land, guess what they were given? The houses of their captors. Their enslavers were giving them clothing. Their enslavers were giving them gold and silver and bronze. And they were saying, take what you want. Here's our money. Here's our stuff. Take it, just leave. How many of you thought about that for a minute? I've often wondered, if you walked into a sinner's hangout and you started preaching Jesus Christ, they may beat on you a little bit, but would they finally pay you to leave? I'm not saying that we should do that. We were recently at a concert, and the music was playing. And some of the bands were good, some of the bands not so hot. But what caught my eye is in the middle, in the arena, standing by one door, was a member of a 1% motorcycle gang. Now, the 1% motorcycle gang, they're the guys who love being illegal. And I'm not going to mention the gang name. But I took notice because he was in his colors. He had his vest on. And I went, interesting. Christian event, absolute heathen. And I almost walked up to him and said, "Hi, how you doing?" And the only thing that stopped me was this. I'll be honest. I am not that guy who's afraid of that. Okay? Because I've learned that even the hardcore people, if you talk to them honestly, 9 times out of 10, they'll talk back honestly. Okay? Why I didn't was because this dude was grooving to the music. He was into it, and I really didn't want to interrupt him because maybe that music was what he needs to come closer to the Lord. And he doesn't need me to break that. But I did think about it more than once that night. I think actually after the set that he was listening to ended, I went back and he was gone. That's okay. If we follow God's plan, we too will get to the promised land. What is that promised land, Pastor? I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. I know what it looks like in my mind, but it may look different in your mind. Maybe it's being on every channel, not just 2. Maybe it's having 500 people in the room and having to go to the main sanctuary. Maybe it's spending every night of the week in house Bible studies. Maybe it's having so many people here that we need to hire more staff. Maybe it's the people in this room and the people on that screen coming in and drawing closer to the Lord and being the body of Christ. And like it was mentioned earlier, maybe it's the pastor standing outside going like this to get people to come in. I don't know. Please don't do that.
Try it.
Try it. You'll like it.
No.
Folks, we are on a journey. It will not come quickly. We will not make the promised land next Sunday or the Sunday after that.
Could happen.
If we are obedient, we won't spend 40 years in the wilderness. So that would be harsh. We may have already been there for a while. But it comes out to 4 things. Pray. Pray that God's will is done. Pray that God shows you somebody to talk to about Him. Pray that you are the Christian He wants you to be today. By the way, how many of you know that if you pray that you let God be the Christian He wants you to be today, that means it may be different tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
See, I used to shoot competitive archery. And I practiced my tail off. I worked hard. And I went to my first collegiate tournament. That's how long ago it was, folks, but I remember to this day. And I shot horribly. I averaged 30 points under my average, kind of like how I bowl. And my mom was, and I brought friends in and family in to watch me shoot because I was going to do great. And I didn't even do as good as I normally do. And on the way home, I felt terrible. My mom says, "You don't seem like yourself." And I didn't want to tell her that I was disappointed at my performance because that sounds prideful. She says, "You don't look good." I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Lean forward." So I did, and we were in the car, and she put her hand on my head. She goes, "We better get a thermometer." Put the thermometer in. I felt stupid. She's driving down, my dad's driving, she's in the back, front seat. I'm sitting in the back with the thermometer sticking out of my mouth. And it said 102. You know what I learned? You do not perform well when you're at 102. But guess what I did perform well at? That day, being sick. Folks, we're going to go through hard times. We're going to go through good times. All we have to do is pray, listen, and when God tells us to do something, act. the way he tells us to. By the way, there's always two acts. You can either do it his way or you can do it every other way under the sun. By the way, every way under the sun is code for the wrong way. And when we do those three